Hello and welcome to WHIR TV. I'm Anastasia Tabanos. North America's largest web hosting conference, HostingCon, just wrapped up its second show at the Mirage Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, Nevada. While at the show, we caught up with the executive director of HostingCon, George Roberts IV, and got some insight into what he liked and didn't like about this year's show. Hi George, thanks for joining us today.
No problem. My pleasure.
So, a lot of people noticed that the show was bigger and better than before. How do you think it turned out?
We think it turned out great. We had way more people than we expected. We anticipated we were going to have somewhere between 900 and 950 people, and we ended up about 1,100. And when we looked at our numbers about 4 weeks ago, we were at 750 registrations. So we added, almost 400 people in the last 4 weeks, which is, that's incredible. And we've been getting really good feedback from all of our exhibitors. The exhibit hall is about twice the size of last year. We changed the schedule a little bit this year, and I think it's flowing a little bit better. There's not as much overlap between the conference sessions and the exhibit hall hours, so people don't feel like they've got to make a choice between going to one or the other. So we've been getting good feedback. I think it's been going real well.
Did you find it was easier to organize than last year, considering you had done it once before?
In some respects, yes. We did have the experience of doing it last year, so that helped a lot. We obviously had a lot of contacts from all the exhibitors and everything. So whereas last year we were sort of starting up something fresh, and we were having to make all of these contacts to try and find out whether or not people were interested in exhibiting and attending. We already had that built-in base this year, so that helped a lot. But, in other respects, when you move to a new venue in a new city, there's a lot of other challenges associated with that as well. So that was new this year for us, but, it was fun. It was interesting to work with the Mirage. They were great, great to work with. It's a wonderful facility. So we're pretty confident we're going to be back here again next year.
I'm curious as to what kind of feedback you've gotten.
We've been getting really positive feedback. There's been a few things here and there that didn't work out quite the way we planned, and we've always told everybody we're very open to even positive or negative feedback, because the only way we can improve the show each year as we go along is for people to tell us what we messed up. And we know we messed things up. It's going to happen. And we're not ever going to claim we're going to be perfect, because we probably won't ever be perfect. So, anybody watching who went to the show, let us know what you think.
So what did you think was a particular highlight with the show?
I think our keynotes this year were excellent. We had some really good keynotes last year, but we decided to go away from sort of the vendor keynotes this year. We had a really good talk on Monday by Thornton May from the IT Leadership Academy, and it was a little sort of off the beaten path from what you would normally think to see at a hosting conference, because we wanted to sort of show people who are in the hosting industry that the gap is sort of closing between traditional IT and the hosting world. They used to sort of be separate, and the people in IT didn't acknowledge that hosting existed, and hosting didn't acknowledge that the rest of IT existed. And that's not really the case anymore. You're seeing Fortune 500 companies outsourcing their infrastructure and things like that. So we wanted to sort of bring that element in. And the panel we had on Tuesday, we got a lot of really good feedback from.
Great. Now, if there's anything that you could have done differently, what would you change next time around?
We had some issues with our registration desk this year. We had one of our printers blow out an hour into registration, which dropped us down from 3 stations to 2, which sort of slowed things down on Monday when the bulk of the registrations came in. We're going to do some upgrades on our registration system so we can make that more efficient next year. Our staff was great. We just had some technical limitations that sort of slowed things down. We'd like to get everybody through in about 10 minutes during the sort of the really rush periods, and it was taking anywhere from 20 to 25 minutes this year, so we weren't real happy with that. I think we're going to do a little bit better job communicating with all of the people that are involved with the show, the speakers and the press and things like that, to make sure that everybody sort of knows where they're supposed to be, what's going on when, just so that there's not any confusion from that side. The attendees don't necessarily see that so much, but there's a lot of sort of behind the scenes things that go on that we think we can make better for the people who are involved in the show.
Yeah, one thing that I actually heard from some people was that they didn't feel the exhibit hall was as full as was anticipated, and that sessions weren't as well attended, possibly because of the distracting nature of Vegas. Do you think this was a distracting venue?
I don't think so. Part of the issue, I think, is that because of the size of the venue, we're in the event center here, and the Mirage doesn't like to split the event center because it's difficult to sell only a portion of it. So we took the whole event center, and some of the rooms that we use for the sessions are oversized for what we needed. So it does make the sessions look like they aren't as well attended as they could be. We had about 500 or 550 full conference registrations. So when you split that over the course of 4 sessions going on, you're probably going to get anywhere from about 125 or so people per session. What we were seeing is in the business track and the shared services track, we were seeing anywhere from 100 to 175 people in those tracks. And then in the enterprise and data center in the shared services, we were seeing usually right around 50 to 75. So when you balance all that out, that's the majority of the full conference people. So I think we did pretty well on the attendance. I think it's sort of a perception based on the size of the rooms.
So you're saying you don't think the venue is distracting at all?
No, I mean, honestly, I'm sure people snuck away here and there. From the exhibit hall perspective, the feedback we're getting is Monday was insane as far as the traffic. What we find is usually the first day, everybody wants to come through the exhibit hall. They fly through here, they go, hey, what do you do? What do you do? And they sort of make their way through and find out who's where. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday, they come back and take the time to meet with the people they really want to talk to. So Monday, while it's really busy, isn't necessarily the greatest day for the exhibitors because they don't get a lot of really good qualified contacts. Whereas on Tuesday and Wednesday, while it's slower, it's more steady and the people that are coming through really want to talk to them about whatever it is they're offering.
Another thing that I've heard from some people is regarding the demographic of the attendees. Do you think you're going to try and pursue more of an international audience next time around?
Well, we did have a number of attendees here from international companies. We were only about, I think, 75 or 80% from the U.S. So, Canada's got a nice component here, I think about 6 or 7%. And then, we've got, I'd have to look at the numbers again, but I think somewhere around 15 or 20 different countries that are represented. So while the numbers aren't overwhelming, it does make sense that we're going to have the majority of people here from the U.S. We do have a pretty good representation from outside the U.S. We do a call for papers, very early on in the process. And those people that approach us with presentation ideas for the show, we go through all of them, and we don't really look at where the person's from. We look at the value of what the presentation is. So we'd love to have proposals from international companies, because I'd like to be able to get a better feel for what's going on internationally. So, anybody out there from international companies, please feel free to submit proposals when we announce the call for papers, because we definitely would love to have you guys here speaking next year.
So where do you see HostingCon going?
I think that we don't want the show to be too big, because when you get a trade show that becomes so big that it just, it becomes unfocused, so we want to make sure we don't lose the focus of the show. If we do add any other components to it, we would probably do those sort of as, not necessarily separate, but make sure that there's a delineation between the different components, because we want to make sure that if you're looking at the hosting related exhibits, that you know what you're looking at, rather than walking through and seeing one exhibit that is pertaining to hosting and then another one that's pertaining to web development.
Now, how would you like the industry to look at HostingCon?
First off, the people that I've talked to before we started doing HostingCon, they knew they were hosting providers, but they didn't feel like they were sort of part of an industry, and without a forum like this to get everybody together and actually sort of feel like you're all in this together, you don't get that sort of sense of camaraderie. And I think that that's one element to what we're doing here, and I think that's a really important thing that going forward we need to continue to foster. Secondly, we want to be able to show what's going on in the industry, but we also want to be able to sort of impact what's going on, because it's still a very fragmented industry. And you have a lot of people who sort of get it and they understand really where the industry should be going. And you have a lot of people in the industry who don't get it, who are still doing I'm going to try and sell my services for as cheap as possible because that's how I have to get customers. So we want to try and not necessarily, shape the industry, but at least bring the people together who are leaders in the industry to let them talk with everybody and let them know, hey, this is where we think the industry should be going, and get some dialogue going, sort of get everybody sort of on the right track and on the same page.
Lastly, what can we expect from HostingCon next year?
More of the same. you know, we're going to have all of the leaders in the industry. You know, I've already been approached by a number of companies who were not exhibiting this year, who said, you know, they came this year specifically because they wanted to see the show and wanted to see if it would be the right market for them to exhibit. And they basically said, when are you going to have contracts available? So I imagine, you know, we'll see some new faces next year. You know, some of the people who were here this year, maybe they find it wasn't the right market for them, they won't be here. But we'll have some new faces to come in. You know, we had awesome sponsors. I mean, you can see the list of sponsors here. You know, Microsoft, SWSoft, FastServers.net, Ensim. You know, all the big players are here. So if you guys didn't make it out, come out next year.
Awesome. Thanks for taking the time to speak to us, George.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.